The Price of Success. My name is Regina Lavrova. I was born and raised in Oakwood, a quiet suburb where diplomas framed on the wall meant more than kindness or passion. There was no room in our home for vague dreams, only for a clear plan graduate at the top of my class, get into a prestigious university, and then choose one of the respected professions: law, medicine, or science. My father, Daniel Peterson, was a tenured professor in the political science department at a local state university. He always stood tall, dressed impeccably, and spoke as if he were constantly giving a lecture. My mother, Lydia Scott, was the principal of the city's only charter high school and believed that any mistake could be avoided if people simply followed discipline and tradition. For them, my older sister, Angelina Lavrova, was the ideal child. At 4, she could recite classic poems by heart. And at 18, she was accepted to Harvard Medical School on a full scholarship. When she announced her acceptance, the whole family threw a huge celebration. Relatives from all over the state came. My father raised his glass, his eyes shining with pride. "This," he announced, "is the future of America. And all this internet nonsense of yours is just child's play." This comment was clearly aimed at me. I didn't hate studying, but from a young age, I was far more fascinated by what happened behind a computer screen than by copying lecture notes. At 12, I fixed my neighbor's jammed printer in exchange for about $8 and 2 movie tickets. At 15, I wrote my first lines of code to create a simple website for Anna's local pottery workshop. Just 3 days later, she got her first online order. I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, my mother frowned and said, "You should focus on the SATs. These hobbies of yours won't help you get into a decent college." My father was even harsher. Staring at the laptop I was setting up for a client, he said coldly, "If you want to be a tech support girl for the rest of your life, keep it up, but don't expect a penny from us." I forced a smile. The only thing I was never given in this house was the right to be different. At every dinner, Angelina's name was repeated like a sacred mantra. Angelina was chosen to present at a symposium, or Professor Davis said she had natural leadership potential. And then they'd ask me, "Regina, are you going to retake your algebra exam again in May of my senior year?" Our family sat at the dinner table surrounded by brochures from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford that my father had thoughtfully laid out. None of this meant anything to me. My heart pounded as I said the words I'd been holding back for so long. I won't be applying to college. I want to start my own business. I already have a plan. My first client. And almost $2, $750, saved up from building websites. A fork clattered onto a plate. My mother fell silent. My father slowly stood up. His voice cut through the air like a razor blade. "That will not happen. Not under this roof." I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't concern, it was disgust. As if I had just said something obscene. I didn't cry. I stood up. I went to my room and started packing. A week later, I left home with just 3 suitcases, an old laptop, and unwavering determination. No one saw me off. No one wished me luck. They were sure I'd crawl back, ashamed and begging for forgiveness. My first apartment was on the 3rd floor of a rundown building on the outskirts of Albany. It was barely 450 square feet, with creaky floors and windows that were always drafty, but it was the first space I could truly call my own. The kitchen was so narrow I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched. I placed a used wooden desk under the only outlet in the living room and turned it into a makeshift office. Every morning, I brewed coffee in an old Mr. Prome coffee machine, sat down to work before sunrise, and continued until the streetlights came on. There was no salary, no family expectations, just me and a simple idea. The idea behind my business was to help local artisans sell their wares online. I called the platform Crafty Corner. It wasn't revolutionary, but I believed in it. New York's Hudson Valley was full of talented people potters, crafters, wood carvers, but most had no idea how to sell their work online. I created simple Shopify storefronts and took a 5% commission on every successful sale. The rest was entirely the seller's. In those first few weeks, I spent my days coding and my nights cold emailing small craft shops. Most never responded. Some asked, "What college are you from?" When I told them I hadn't gone to college. They fell silent. One even sent me a laughing emoji and said, "But good luck with that." My bank account emptied faster than I expected. I lived on ramen noodles, boiled eggs, and canned beans. Every night, I turned the heater on full blast. Not just to keep the cold out, but also to ward off the creeping fear that was beginning to seep into every corner of my mind. I once called my mother just to hear her voice. But when I told her I hadn't returned to school, her response was immediate and icy. "Then don't expect anyone to be waiting for you here." I thought I had gotten used to their coldness. But after that call, I sat on the floor of my apartment in complete silence for almost an hour, feeling like the last thread connecting me to the past had snapped. 3 months after launching, Crafty Corner had exactly 2 customers. One was Joanna Meyer, a potter, and the other was Victor Johnson, an elderly woodworker who lived 40 minutes outside the city. He called me Computer Girl and often confused my name, calling me Lucy. But he still paid me about $16.50 a month. Thanks to them, I was able to pay my first electricity bill without going into credit card debt. I thought things would gradually improve. But one February morning, while I was dropping off a shipment for Joanna, another car crashed into my old Honda Civic at an intersection. No one was injured, but my car wouldn't start. The repair bill came to almost $550. Money I didn't have. I sat in the middle of my living room, surrounded by rolls of packing tape and unpaid bills, wondering, what if I made the wrong choice? That evening, I decided to attend a local small business meetup at the city library. It was a free event I'd seen advertised on the city's Facebook page. I didn't know there could be anything else as comforting as being in a room with other people who were trying as hard as I was. It was there that I met Margaret Lewis, a woman in her 50s with neatly styled gray hair, simple clothes, and a piercing gaze. She was the founder of Ledgerflow, a company that developed software for small businesses, and she was sharing lessons on scaling a product. When the Q&A session ended, I waited for the room to empty, then nervously walked over and handed her my homemade business card, almost dropping it in the process. "I'm Regina, and I run a small platform that helps artisans sell online. I have no training, not funding, but I have real clients and real income. I bite small." Margaret was silent for a few seconds, studying me, then smiled and extended her hand. "Do you have customer data?" she asked. I nodded, opened my laptop, and showed her the orders and growth charts, modest but clear. She ran her eyes over several tables and then said the phrase that changed everything: "You don't need more individual sales. You need more customers." I looked at her, not quite understanding. "Instead of selling 1 bar of soap at a time," she continued, "why not sell your order management software to 50 craft stores? The goal is the same, to help them, but on a larger scale and with greater value. You already have a model. Now it's time to redesign it." We talked until almost 1:00 p.m. As I walked back, despite my leg aching from the morning's accident, I felt lighter. A door had opened in my head, and I knew I was ready to walk through it. Right after meeting Margaret, I renamed the company Craft Technologies. The old name, Crafty Corner, sounded too naive and no longer suited the new direction. Under her mentorship, I pivoted from a consumer retail platform to creating supply chain management software specifically for small and medium-sized artisan businesses, a market that was largely unexplored. In the first month after this pivot, I averaged only 3 hours of sleep a night. I completely rewrote the entire system, using a new framework, and launched an email campaign targeting independent retailers across the Northeast. Each new contract helped me pay off the car repair debt, cover hosting costs, and eventually hire a part-time intern, Kyle, a UX design student I met at a local meetup. We worked in my apartment, using ramen noodle boxes as makeshift laptop stands, and hanging a whiteboard on the refrigerator door. It was chaotic, but it was in this space that artisanal techniques began to take shape. By fall, after more than 100 unsuccessful cold calls, I received an email from the operations department of a chain of handmade furniture stores called Birch and Maple. They had 36 locations in 6 states and were using outdated software from the early 2000s. The sender, Jennifer Thompson, simply wrote, "I heard your software can track inventory at each location. Send us a demo." I reread that email 10 times. After 5 sleepless nights, Kyle and I created a live demo that simulated inventory and order management across multiple locations. With a clean dashboard, simple navigation, and an intelligent alert system, when Jennifer Thompson called back, she didn't hesitate. "We need to deploy this system within 60 days. Can you handle it?" I glanced at Kyle. He gave me a thumbs up. "Yes," I said, "but I'll need to meet with your technical team to integrate the APIs for the checkout and delivery." "Where is your office?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "We're working remotely right now, but I can fly to your headquarters in San Francisco whenever you need me." That first meeting was also my first time in a real office, with clean carpets and an automatic coffee machine. I was wearing a blazer and slightly worn shoes, but I held myself straight, answering every technical question with a confidence forged over long nights of coding on a broken laptop. The final contract was signed for about $330. With a $110, 000 advance payment to begin implementation. I didn't cry. I simply sat motionless in the Uber on the way to the hotel, looking out the window and clutching my backpack as if it held a whole new chapter of my life. From that moment on, everything changed rapidly. After the successful completion of our first project, Birch and Maple recommended us to 3 more networks. I officially registered the company, leased our first office in Albany, and hired 5 full-time employees. Within 2 years, Craft Technologies had offices in Albany, San Francisco, and Austin. We served over 60 retail chains, and the platform grew into an entire ecosystem. By the 3rd year, revenue exceeded $880. In my 4th year, I was invited to speak at the Women in Tech conference, where I discussed how simple software tools can transform traditional industries. After my presentation, a middle-aged man approached me and extended his business card with both hands. It was Michael Dennis, Director of Strategic Development at a venture capital firm, Bright Horizons Ventures. "We've been following Craft Technologies since the beginning of this year," he said. "If you're open to a merger and acquisition, we have an offer." I smiled and accepted his business card, but made no promises. The following week, I received 3 more takeover offers. The highest valued the company at about $27. $5 million. A figure that stunned our entire team. Kyle blurted out, "If you sell it, I'll be happy for you. But please, don't. We're not done yet." I looked up at the development roadmap pinned to the wall in our conference room, where we used colorful sticky notes to track modules. I knew exactly where we were and where we were going. I declined all 3 offers, not because the money wasn't enough, but because Craft Technologies wasn't just a company. It was proof I had chosen the right path. the path my family had once completely rejected. Selling it now would have been like sitting back at that old dinner table, silently bowing my head under their disapproving gazes, admitting defeat. Even when the company was thriving, I kept my personal life almost to the point of being secretive. I still drove my aging Honda Civic, lived in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in an average neighborhood, and when anyone asked about my work, I'd simply say, I create small programs for craft stores. My family, predictable, as always, only mentioned me when discussing their disappointments. My mother still called once a month, not to check in on me, but to tell me that Angelina had just been appointed head of the residency program at a major Boston hospital, or that her husband had published another biochemistry article in a scientific journal. I learned to smile and remain silent. But everything changed when my father, Daniel Peterson, was laid off after 28 years of teaching political science at his university. Budget cuts had eliminated his department. And at 61, he suddenly lost his main source of income. A week later, my mother was diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid disease, requiring long-term treatment with specialized medications not covered by their health insurance. When Angelina learned the news, her response was dry and indifferent. I'm swamped at the hospital. I can't help. I sat in the silence of my office, staring at the bank statement my mom had accidentally sent to an old email address I still had access to. One line stood out. This month's mortgage payment is overdue. 16 days overdue. Just below that was a medication bill for almost $1. 320. No one in my family turned to me for help. Perhaps they still believed I was barely making ends meet. Too stubborn to go back to school. But I knew that if no one intervened, they would lose their home. He contacted my lawyer, Robert Kennedy, who helped structure investment contracts for craft technologies. I asked him to establish a trust fund called the Spring Hill Foundation. Disguised as a grant from a nonprofit educational initiative, within a week, the Spring Hill Foundation began making monthly payments to keep their mortgage on time. My parents received a letter from their bank, Chase, stating that an organization had volunteered to support their loan due to the couple's long-standing contributions to local education. They didn't ask any questions. Meanwhile, I asked Robert to establish a shell company, Brightstone Consulting, registered in Delaware. Through it, I signed a contract with my father, hiring him to write a manuscript for a civic education curriculum. The salary was about $1. 650 per month. No one checked anything. My father began bragging to his friends about being appointed a regional educational advisor. My mother, relieved, assumed they were being assisted by some silent benefactor. And I quietly approved the monthly transfers. I never asking for a thank you. But that wasn't all. Last June, I learned that my sister Angelina had given birth to twins. Due to unexpected expenses for a C-section, she had to postpone enrolling her children in the prestigious bilingual preschool she had once spoken so enthusiastically about. A few weeks later, 2 scholarships appeared in the preschool's records under the name of the Northeast Infant Potential Development Fund. Each amounted to exactly the annual cost for their 2 children. Jacob and Lily, Angelina wrote on Instagram, with the words capitalized, "It's a miracle. God always helps in his own way." I read this and smiled wryly. Over the past 3 years, I'd spent over, she opt, 000 on supporting all aspects of their life. It was all legal, all carefully disguised. I was living 2 lives. At work, I was Regina Levrova, the CEO, dubbed the tech wizard of the craft sector by Forbes magazine. I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts and spoke at conferences. To my family, I was still the uneducated daughter, probably selling something online somewhere. Every holiday, I'd come home in a simple rented car, wearing an old coat, and listen to my mother ask if I had changed my mind about going back to university. My father would nod slowly, as if silently forgiving me for being nothing special. I said nothing. I still kept Kiet. I still paid my bills on time. That year, New Year's Eve was gloomy and rainy. I arrived home with a bottle of good California wine, a nearly 40-page color printout in a folder, and a flash drive containing the presentation I'd given at a tech conference in September. I'd been looking forward to this day for quite some time. When I walked into the house, my mother, Lydia, was serving salad in crystal bowls. Father Daniel sat in his armchair with a business newspaper on his lap. Giving me only a slight nod of greeting, Angelina came down the stairs, dressed as if she were ready for the cover of a medical and lifestyle magazine. Her husband unbuckled the twins from their car seats and whispered, "Let's not let the kids mess around with Aunt Regina's weird laptop again." I didn't react, only smiled weakly. Dinner began promptly at 8:00 p.m. As expected, my mother raised a toast to the health and unity of the family. Then, as expected, my father gave a 3-minute speech about Angelina's contributions to medicine. How lucky they were to have a son-in-law who valued knowledge, and the joy of watching their grandchildren excel. Not a single word about me. As everyone began carving the turkey, I carefully placed the stack of documents on the table, right in front of my parents. "I'd like to share something today." My mother froze, frowning, as if I had just spilled gravy on the tablecloth. Angelina eyed the paper suspiciously. I pulled one sheet from the stack and placed it on the table. It was a copy of a spread from the Business Weekly Tech Week, featuring a rare photo of me smiling. The headline read, "Regina Lavrova, founder and CEO of Craft Technologies, a software platform transforming the American craft market." My father picked up the magazine, leafing through it as if searching for signs of counterfeiting. "Where did you get that?" His tone was colder than the wind outside. "In my own life, Dad. I've been managing Craft Technologies for 8 years now. The company employs over 180 people in 3 cities. It's currently valued at almost $38, $5 million. I then looked at my mother. "And Mom, Dad, I'm the one behind all the support this family has received over the past 4 years." I opened the folder. Bank transfers from the Spring Hill Foundation to their mortgage account. Health insurance documents for my mother financed by a private trust. A fictitious contract from Brightstone Consulting under which my father received a monthly salary. And scholarship award letters for Jacob and Lily. All with proof. An icy silence fell over the room. My father abruptly pushed back his chair and stood up. His face turned purple. "Are you making this all up? A college dropout without a diploma suddenly becomes a millionaire? Lie to the whole world. But don't insult our intelligence. You're lying to yourselves." I spoke softly. I remained silent because I thought the family needed to preserve its pride. But I was tired. I'm tired of hiding everything just to be tolerated in this house. My mother whispered, as if afraid of her own voice. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I looked at her, slowly answering. "Because every time I opened my mouth, you looked at me like I didn't belong here. So I chose to help without asking for recognition." Angelina intervened coldly. "I worked 14 hours a day to become a doctor. And you write code at home and suddenly become a celebrated director. It's ridiculous." "I don't deny your hard work," I said. "But you weren't the only one struggling." I fell asleep at the keyboard. I ate dry ramen because I couldn't even afford to boil water. I built this from nothing. My father slammed his palm on the table. "Enough, I don't want to hear another word. You're a fraud. A disgrace to the family. People like you can only make money by deception." I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. So that's how it is. You don't want to know who I really am. You just want the perfect version of me that you've made up. Okay then. I gathered up the documents, carefully placing them back in my bag. As I turned to the door, my mother gently grabbed my wrist. "Regina, what about next month's support?" I looked at her. My voice was barely audible. "Mom, People who consider me a disgrace can't continue to live off my money. From today on, it's all over. I left the house where I'd always been considered a burden. It was still raining, but every drop that fell on my shoulders felt incredibly light. The next morning, I flew to Miami without a letter, without a message. I sat by the window, watching the clouds dissolve into the sky where I once thought I belonged. No longer. 3 years ago, I bought a small house near Miami. Now I've come there to start over. I hired a local architect to transform the house into a real home, bright, clean, modern. My lawyer sent a formal notice terminating all financial support. I no longer owed them anything. 2 weeks later, I walked into the new headquarters of Craft Technologies in Miami. The office was on the 9th floor of a glass building overlooking the sea. I was no longer pretending. I was the CEO, the founder. I was Regina Lavrova, in every sense of the word. I began leading an active social life and founded a foundation to help young entrepreneurs without degrees. Over time, reconciliation came. But on my terms. First, my sister called, then a letter from my father. Both apologized. I didn't rush back into their arms, but I gave them a second chance. Based on respect, I realized I didn't need my family to take me back. I had my own community, my own family, who had chosen to be with me from the very beginning, unconditionally. I forgave them, not because they had changed. I forgave them to be free. And for the first time in my life, I moved forward not to prove anything. I moved forward because I was already whole. Story 2. You've gone too far. My mother-in-law yelled when she found out I was expecting a girl and not an heir. This isn't my son's blood. I'll submit a DNA test when this girl is born. My mother-in-law screamed, spitting saliva. At a family dinner, I looked at my husband, who was cowering, and calmly dialed the number. 15 minutes later, my husband's father burst into the apartment and yelled at his wife from the doorway, making her knees buckle. Dear friends, before we continue, please tell us your name in the comments. What city are you from? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy listening. Marina held the striped test in her hands, and her heart was pounding so hard, it seemed to be heard throughout the entire apartment. 2 clear, bright lines. She was pregnant. After 2 years of hope, doubt, and quiet tears into her pillow. It seemed like a miracle. She ran out of the bathroom and threw her arms around her husband, who was drinking coffee in the kitchen. Lesha. We did it. We're having a baby. Alexei scooped her up in his arms and twirled her around their small, sunlit kitchen. His face glowed with such genuine, childlike happiness that Marina burst into tears. At that moment, she felt absolutely happy. 30 years old. Loved. A successful landscape designer with exciting projects. And now also a mother to be. Their life in a cozy 3-room apartment in a residential area of Nizhny Novgorod seemed to have finally found complete harmony. Lyosha inherited the apartment from his grandmother, and they moved in immediately after their wedding. Marina lovingly furnished their nest, transforming the old Stalin-era building into a modern and stylish space. She knew she was lucky. She didn't have to pay a mortgage, and she could safely save for the future. A future that now took on a very real shape. Only one circumstance marred this idyll. Tamara Pavlovna, Lyosha's mother, Tamara Pavlovna, the former head of the district's legislative assembly, was a powerful woman accustomed to having everything done her way. She considered her son the height of perfection, and from the very first day they met, it made it clear to Marina that she was merely a temporary fixture, an annoying obstacle to her son's brilliant future. Every Sunday lunch turned into an exam, which Marina failed time and again. Either the borscht wasn't rich enough, or her husband's shirts weren't perfectly ironed, or her job wasn't serious enough, planting flowers. What kind of profession is that for the wife of a respectable man, Lyosha? Her 32-year-old respectable husband only smiled awkwardly at these attacks and tried to change the subject. He loved his mother with a blind, all-forgiving love and was terrified of upsetting her. That evening, after the initial euphoria of the news had subsided, Lyosha said guiltily, "I need to call Mom and tell her the news." Marina tensed. "Lyosha, maybe we should wait until the first ultrasound. Just to be absolutely sure, what are you doing? She'll be upset if we find out it's not the first one." He was already dialing. "Mom. Hi. We have news." Marina heard her mother-in-law's joyful cry on the phone. But then came a phrase that became the first alarm bell, a harbinger of the storm to come. "Finally, I thought I'd never see it again." Tamara Pavlovna decided excitedly. "I hope it's an heir, not a wench. We need a successor to the Belov family line." Lyosha only chuckled nervously. Marina remained silent, but a chill ran down her spine. She looked at her husband's happy face and thought they were in for a difficult time. She didn't yet know how difficult. Her mother-in-law's words about the heir being a thorn in her side lingered in Marina's soul. She tried to convince herself it was just a figure of speech, typical of the older generation. But her intuition told her it was far more serious. Tamara Pavlovna was obsessed with the idea of continuing the family line. And by family line, she undoubtedly meant exclusively the male line. Her husband, Igor Matveyevich, a retired colonel, was a stern and taciturn man. He rarely interfered in family matters, giving his wife complete freedom of choice. And his opinion regarding the gender of the future grandson or granddaughter remained a mystery. Tamara Pavlovna, without waiting for any ultrasounds, launched into a frenzy of activity. Just a week after the call, she arrived with huge bags from the children's store. "Here, Lyoshenka, look what I bought for your son," she announced from the doorway, pulling out tiny blue bodysuits, onesies with cars, and booties shaped like soccer balls. "Mom, we told you to wait." Lyosha tried to object, looking at Marina in confusion. "We don't even know who's coming yet. What's there to know?" Her mother-in-law waved her hand, walking into the living room and laying out her groceries on the sofa. "I have a feeling it's a boy. My mother's heart won't lie. The Belovs need brides for marriage." Marina gritted her teeth. Every time her mother-in-law visited, she felt like a stranger in her own home. Tamara Pavlovna acted like a full-fledged mistress, checking the refrigerator, rearranging the cabinets, commenting on every little detail. "Marinochka, why is there dust on your top shelf?" she'd say, running her finger along the bookcase. "Pregnant women need to breathe clean air." Lyosha reacted the same way to all these comments. "Mom is just taking care of us." This care was stifling Marina, depriving her of air and personal space. The only thing that stifled her was her work. Marina was leading a major project, developing the concept for a new city park on the site of an abandoned vacant lot. She spent hours poring over drawings, selecting plants, and planning the layout of paths and seating areas. This was her world, where everything depended solely on her professionalism and talent. A world where Tamara Pavlovna couldn't reach with her advice. "You work too much." Her friend Olga told her when they met at a cafe, "You need to rest." "I rest when I'm drawing my flower beds." Marina chuckled. "It's the best. It's calming. Believe me. After an hour of talking to my mother-in-law, even the most difficult client seems like a sweet kitten." Olga, a sharp and pragmatic lawyer, had long advised her friend to put her mother-in-law in her place. "Lyosha is your weakling," she said bluntly. "Until you show your teeth, she'll keep riding you. I don't want to fight, Olya, especially now, and I'll have to." Her friend sighed. "It's impossible to have good relationships with people like that." The first ultrasound didn't show the baby's gender. The baby stubbornly turned away. "It's okay. We'll definitely see next time," Marina told her husband as they left the clinic. "Mom will be upset." Lesha sighed. She's already thought of a name. Stepan, after her grandfather. What if it's a girl Marina couldn't resist? What then? "We'll name her Stepanida." "Don't be silly." He winced. "It'll be a boy." Mom can't be wrong. Marina looked at her husband and realized with bitterness that he wasn't joking. He truly believed in his mother's infallibility. He already loved this hypothetical Stepan and was afraid to even consider another option. Meanwhile, Tamara Pavlovna continued her preparations. She began renovating one of the rooms in her apartment, declaring it would be her grandson's nursery when he stayed with his grandmother. She chose wallpaper with airplanes and ordered furniture in blue tones. All attempts by Marina and even Igor Matveyevich to stop her were met with resistance. "Woman, don't interfere," she snapped at her husband when he, Robka, suggested they perhaps choose something neutral. "Like beige. I know better what my grandson needs." Marina felt the circle tightening around her. Her mother-in-law wasn't just expecting a grandson. She was already creating a world for him in which Marina and her potential daughter had no place. It wasn't just a wish. It was an ultimatum presented to fate itself. And Marina dreaded the day she would have to announce the results of her second ultrasound. Marina awaited the day of her second scheduled ultrasound with a mixture of trepidation and fear. She desperately wanted to finally find out who was living beneath her heart. Yet she was terrified of her mother-in-law's reaction. Lyosha couldn't go with her. An urgent meeting at work. Deep down, Marina was even glad about it. She'd be able to bear this news alone, without his tense sniffles behind her and subsequent sighs about how to tell his mother now. In the dimly lit office, the doctor moved the transducer over her abdomen for a long time, peering at the monitor. "So, Mommy, are you ready?" she smiled. "Your beauty is showing us all her glory. You're a girl." "100%. Marina exhaled. The girl was her daughter. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. She imagined the tiny flesh, the bows, the braids, her little princess. All the stress of the past few months, all those silly blue onesies and talk of an heir seemed so petty and insignificant compared to this enormous, all-consuming happiness. As soon as she left the clinic, she immediately called her husband. "Lyosha, we're having a daughter," she shouted into the phone. Unable to contain her emotions, there was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. "A daughter," he repeated, and there wasn't a trace of her delight in his voice. "Are you sure the doctor wasn't mistaken?" "Not mistaken," Marina replied, more reservedly. "I saw everything on the screen. She's so tiny." "Oh, well," he mumbled. "A girl. Okay. A girl. That's good too. That's good too." The phrase struck a painful chord with her heart. As if a daughter were a consolation prize? "Second class. Aren't you happy?" she asked bluntly. "I am. It's just unexpected. Mom was so set on a boy. And you and I. Lyosha. Who were we set on?" Her voice rang out. "Or does our opinion no longer count, Katya?" "I don't start," he said wearily. "I'm happy to have any child. The main thing is that he's healthy. Let's talk tonight." That evening, the conversation didn't work out. Lyosha arrived late, claiming he'd lied, and immediately buried himself in his computer. Marina realized he simply didn't want to discuss the matter. He dreaded the upcoming conversation with his mother more than he rejoiced at the news about his daughter. They decided to tell everyone at the next Sunday dinner at Tamara Pavlovna's. Marina had been preparing for this day all week, as if it were a decisive battle. She bought a new dress, did her hair, and even baked her signature lemon pie, hoping it would soften her mother-in-law's heart a little. She wanted to believe in a miracle, that Tamara Pavlovna seeing their happy faces and hearing that the baby was fine, would stop worrying and welcome her granddaughter. On Sunday, they arrived at her mother-in-law's. Igor Matveyevich met them in the hallway and nodded silently. But Marina caught a warm sparkle in his eyes. It was as if he knew or guessed something. Tamara Pavlovna was in her element. From the doorway, she criticized Marina's hairstyle, too frivolously for an expectant mother. And the pie, too much sugar. It's bad for the baby. At the table, after the soup was poured, Lyosha, clearing his throat, finally made up his mind. Mom, Dad, we went to the ultrasound. We're having a daughter. He said it as if he were confessing to a crime. Marina took his hand under the table, trying to support him. The spoon in Tamara Pavlovna's hand paused halfway to her mouth. She slowly placed it on the table. Her face, which a second ago had expressed benevolent condescension, turned into an impenetrable mask. What she asked, though she'd heard everything perfectly well, a daughter, Leisha repeated, more quietly, healthy and beautiful. I see? And the mother-in-law said icily, looking around at everyone with a heavy gaze. Well, the first pancake, as they say, is always lumpy. Igor Matveyevich choked on his soup. Toma, what are you saying? He asked hoarsely. What did I say? She shrugged, looking at her husband defiantly. I'm stating a fact. The Belov's mouth will probably stop there. It's okay. Lyoshenka. She turned to her son, completely ignoring Marina. Try harder next time. The main thing is not to despair. You still have your whole life ahead of you. Marina sat there, unable to bear it. She couldn't utter a word. The air felt like it had been sucked out of her lungs. She looked at Lesha for support, but he sat with his head bowed, picking at his salad with a fork. He didn't say anything. Not a single word. In defense of their unborn daughter, in defense of his wife. At that moment, Marina realized with terrifying clarity that her marriage was a sham. She wasn't married to a man, but to his mother, and there was no place for her and her daughter in this family. The drive home after dinner at her mother-in-law's passed in oppressive silence. Marina looked out the window at the streets of Nizhny Novgorod, passing by, and felt a cold rage boiling inside her. Every word Tamara Pavlovna said was like trying to improve on the first pancake. It sounded like a slap in her face. But the most painful thing was Lyosha's silence. His cowardly, humiliating silence. He didn't even try to argue with his mother, let alone defend his family. When they entered the apartment, Marina couldn't take it anymore. Is that all she asked? Kicking her shoes into the hallway. Are you still going to keep quiet? What did you want me to do? Lesha snapped. Avoiding her gaze, cause a scene, ruin mother's mood. Yes. Marina shouted. I wanted you to make a scene. I wanted you to tell your mother that we're happy that we're expecting a daughter. That she's our own flesh and blood. Not a firstborn. Well, you know how Mom is. He began his usual song. That's just her nature. She'll grumble and calm down. Why make a mountain out of a molehill? It's a molehill for you. Marina couldn't believe her ears. Your mother just insulted our child. Humiliated me. And for you, it's a molehill. Lyosha, do you even understand what happened? I understand you're working yourself up over nothing. He raised his voice. Mom was simply upset. She was so looking forward to a grandson. And you think I wasn't expecting a child? Her voice broke. I waited for 2 years. And I'm happy that I'm going to have a daughter. And I don't care who your mother was expecting. Why are her wishes more important than ours? Because she's my mother. He barked. And I'm your wife. She didn't give in. And I'm carrying your child. Or are you already doubting it? Like she is. Lyosha stopped short. He looked at her, and something like shame flickered in his eyes. But it immediately vanished. Don't talk nonsense, he muttered and went into the room, leaving Marina alone in the hallway. From that day on, their life turned into a Cold War. Lyasha became even more distant. He found any excuse to stay late at work. And in the evenings, he disappeared into online games. He avoided conversations about the future, the child, or how they would live together. Marina felt as if she were living with a stranger. Tamara Pavlovna, for her part, changed her tactics. She no longer said nasty things directly, but her passive aggression became even more sophisticated. She called and asked Marina how she was feeling in a sympathetic tone, each time adding, "It's okay. Darling, don't worry. The main thing is that you're healthy. And what about boys, God willing? There will be more boys." She sent links to articles about how a mother's proper nutrition influences the sex of the child, with the note, "Just for your information. Dear." Marina initially tried to ignore the injections, but they were ruining her life, robbing her of the joy of expecting a baby. She stopped answering her mother-in-law's calls, which, of course, immediately became the source of more reproaches from her husband. "Mom's worried. And you're not answering," he'd say. "She means well. Her best intentions are driving me to a nervous breakdown." Marina snapped. The only person who supported her was Igor Matveyevich. One day he called her himself, something he'd never done before. "Marinochka." "Hello?" His voice on the phone was muffled but firm. "Don't pay any attention to Tamara. She's got her own problems. The main thing is the child. A girl is happiness. Believe me. An old soldier." This short conversation meant more to Marina than all of Lyosha's attempts to smooth things over. She felt she had at least one ally in this hostile family. Things weren't going well at work either. The park's client, a local official, proved to be a man of moods. He'd approve a project one day, then demand everything be redone the next. Marina rushed around, making revisions, defending her ideas time and again. It was exhausting, but also strengthening. She learned to be firm, to defend her boundaries, and not to give in to manipulation. These skills, she realized, would be useful beyond her work. She increasingly thought about what would happen if Lyosha never woke up. Would she be able to cope alone? The thought of divorce was terrifying, but it no longer seemed impossible. She looked at her growing belly and realized she was responsible not only for herself, but also for the little life inside her. And she wouldn't allow anyone to ruin that life from the very beginning. The pregnancy had been difficult. Constant stress had taken its toll. Marina suffered from insomnia, and her blood pressure was fluctuating. The doctor strongly recommended more rest and avoiding stress, which in her situation was tantamount to flying to the moon. Lyosha, seeing her state, briefly became more solicitous, buying fruit and brewing soothing tea. But as soon as his mother called, all this concern evaporated. He reverted to a nervous, twitchy teenager caught between two fires. Tamara Pavlovna, realizing that her tactic of quiet grief was unproductive, went on the offensive. She began openly doubting her daughter-in-law's fidelity. At first, these were hints dropped in conversations with relatives, who, of course, immediately reported everything to Marina. "Do you know if our Marinochka has a lot of male friends at work?" she asked her second cousin Lesha. "My Lyashenka hasn't been himself lately. He's probably worried." Then she moved on to direct questions, directed at Lyosha. Marina overheard a snippet of their phone conversation when she went into the kitchen for water. "Just take a closer look. Son," Tamara Pavlovna said, "will the baby look like the Belovs? We all have brown eyes. She's got green genes. You know, a stubborn thing." Marina froze in the doorway, not believing her ears. This wasn't just an insult. It was a direct accusation of infidelity. She waited for Lesha to finish the conversation and asked in an icy tone, What just happened? Leisha winced and turned around. Did you hear that? He looked frightened. Katya? It's just Mom who's worried. That's why she's saying stupid things. Stupid things. Marina felt nausea rising in her throat. She just called me a prostitute. She doubts this is your child. And you didn't even contradict her. What could I say? He spread his hands helplessly. You know, you can't argue with her. She'll stick to her opinion anyway. So maybe it's time to do something to change her mind. Marina screamed. Slam my fist on the table. I finally tell me that you trust me and won't allow me to insult my wife. Quiet. Quiet. You can't be nervous. He tried to hug her, but she recoiled as if from fire. Don't touch me. She was shaking. If you don't call her right now and put her in her place, I don't know what I'll do. Leosha sighed heavily and picked up the phone. But it was clear he was doing it under duress. Mom. Hi. It's me again. He mumbled into the receiver. Listen. I don't say that about Marina again. Okay. She's getting upset. Marina listened to this babble and knew it was useless. He wasn't putting her in her place. He was asking her to be quieter. On top of everything else, problems at work had gotten worse. The park's client, that same official, after lengthy negotiations and approval of the final design, suddenly announced that the city had slashed the budget and the estimate needed to be reduced by 40%. This was disastrous. Cutting the estimate almost in half meant abandoning high-quality materials. Rare plants. Interesting architectural forms, everything that made this project special. It's impossible. Marina told her boss, we can't make a good park for that kind of money. It'll just be a public garden with benches and standard flower beds. I know. He frowned. But orders are orders. Try to make the most of what you have. Marina sat up all night, reworking plans, trying to find a compromise between quality and cost. She felt drained and exhausted. Home was no longer a fortress, and work no longer a haven. Pressure came from all sides. Her father-in-law, Igor Matveyevich, tried to intervene several times. Marina knew he'd had tough conversations with his wife. After one of them, Tamara Pavlovna didn't call them for 3 days. But then it all started again. She doesn't listen to him. Igor Matveyevich told Marina when they bumped into each other at the store. It's like the chain has snapped. I don't know what to do with her. He looked tired and depressed. At that moment, Marina felt genuine sympathy for him for the first time. Living with someone like Tamara Pavlovna must have been pure torture. The closer the due date got, the more unbearable the situation became. Tamara Pavlovna announced that after this girl was born, she would insist on a DNA test. I need to be sure there won't be any foreign blood in our family, she told Leosha. He relayed this to Marina, as always, with a guilty look. And what did you say? She asked, feeling her stomach drop. I said it was nonsense, he replied. But she says that if I refuse, it will only confirm my doubts. Marina looked at her husband with a long, heavy gaze. Do you have doubts? Lyosha. He looked away. No. Of course not. He muttered. But you understand. Mom, I understand everything. Marina said quietly. I understand everything about you. She stood up and went to her room. She no longer cried. The tears were gone. All that remained was a cold, ringing emptiness, and the understanding that she had only herself to rely on. The battle was lost, but the war wasn't over yet. Uncle Lyosha's birthday, Igor Matveyevich's brother, was approaching. It was always a big family celebration, attended by all the relatives. Marina didn't want to go. The thought of being in the same room with Tamara Pavlovna again and listening to her barbs was unbearable. Lyosha, I'm not going, she said firmly a week before the celebration. I'm not feeling well. Katya. It won't work. He sighed. Uncle Vitya will be offended. This isn't just a dinner. It's an anniversary. 65 years. The whole family will be there. If we don't come, everyone will think we have a serious conflict. But ours is not a serious conflict. She chuckled. Your mother is going to take a DNA test after our daughter is born. And you say everything is fine. I'll talk to her. He promised for the 100th time. I'll ask her not to bring it up over the holidays. Please. Let's go. For me, Marina gave in. Not for him, but for Uncle Vidya, a pleasant and kind man who had always treated her warmly. And also because she was tired of hiding. Let them look. Let them talk. She no longer cared. The anniversary party was held at her uncle's large country house. There were many guests, noise, laughter, music. Tamara Pavlovna was the center of attention. As always. She was dressed in a bright burgundy dress and loudly telling a joke, gathering a crowd of admiring listeners around her. Saying Marina. She merely nodded slightly. But a cold, appraising glimmer flickered in her eyes. Marina tried to keep aloof. Conversing with Lesh's cousins. Sweet and simple girls. Igor Matveyevich approached her and brought her a glass of juice. Hang in there. Girl. He said quietly. I'm here. His silent support was the only thing that kept her composure. The climax came when everyone sat down at the table, and the toasts began. After a few standard congratulations, one of the distant relatives, Ad Plump, good-natured woman, spoke up, and I want to raise a glass to our future mothers. She announced, beaming and looking at Marina. I heard you're expecting a girl. What joy, girls. They're mom's helpers. Dad's princesses. Marina smiled sheepishly. Thank you. Aunt Lyuba. And then Tamara Pavlovna intervened. Happiness is... Of course. Happiness. She drawled. A venomous sweetness in her voice, cutting through the din of conversations. But whose happiness is it? An awkward silence fell over the dining room. All eyes turned to her. What are you talking about? Toma the birthday boy frowned. And about that, Victor. That times are different now. Tamara Pavlovna stood up, casting a wretched glance at everyone present. Morals have degenerated. And not every child born into a family is fathered by their husband. Someone gasped. Lyosha sat there, white as a sheet, his head hunched. Marina felt the blood drain from her face. Mom. Stop it, he whispered, but so quietly that almost no one heard him. What? Stop it. His mother-in-law raged, completely losing control. I want the truth. My son deserves to know who he'll be raising. I've been telling you from day one that something's fishy here. All the Belovs have been giving birth to boys for centuries. And now, you girl, you've gone rogue. She pointed a finger at Marina, her face contorted with anger. This isn't my son's blood. I'll file for DNA testing when this girl is born. And if I'm right, I'll throw you out like a mangy cat. Her mother-in-law's words hung in a deafening silence, thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. Marina sat absolutely still, staring into space. She didn't hear the confused whispers at the table, or the sound of someone trying to reprimand Tamara Pavlovna. Her world narrowed to her face, flushed with humiliation, and her heart pounding wildly. She slowly turned her head and looked at her husband. Lesha. Her husband. The father of her child. He sat with his head bowed, intently studying the pattern on the tablecloth. He didn't look at her. I didn't stand up. I didn't say a single word in her defense. At that very moment, when she needed him more than anything in the world, he simply hid, leaving her alone on this shameful scaffold. Betrayal. It wasn't in her mother-in-law's words. Marina had expected nothing less from her. It was in her husband's cowardly silence. It was louder than any scream and more painful than any blow. Tama. Are you crazy? Uncle Vitya finally barked, jumping up from the table. Sit down and shut up. But Tamara Pavlovna was unstoppable. She was reveling in her power, her moment of triumph. And I won't shut up, she shrieked, drooling. Let everyone know what a snake my son has nursed to his bosom. Marina rose slowly. Her legs were weak and wouldn't obey. She didn't say a word. She simply looked at Lyosha one last time. A long, farewell glance. And then turned and headed for the exit. No one tried to stop her. Only Igor Matveyevich stood up after her. But she gestured for him to stay. She stepped out of the house into the cool evening air. The air was filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. She walked along the path, oblivious to where she was going. And the tears she'd so carefully held back finally poured from her eyes. She wasn't crying. She was sobbing, muffled, desperately, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. It wasn't just the cry of an offended woman. It was the wail of her soul, where the last hope had just died. Love was dead. Trust was dead. Family was dead. She made it to the gate and sank down on the bench by the entrance. She didn't care if anyone saw her. She took out her phone to call a taxi. But her fingers wouldn't obey. They were shaking. She stared at the dark screen and saw her reflection in it. Tear-stained. Misérable. Broken. Meanwhile, the row continued in the house. Igor Matveyevich was shouting something at his wife. Uncle Vitya was trying to separate them. Lyosha sat there, frozen, unable to move. Marina sat on the bench, the cold gradually seeping into her bones. But she didn't feel it. An icy desert lay within her. She thought of her little, unborn daughter, of how she, even before she'd been born, had already been stigmatized, insulted, and rejected. And her father, her protector, had done nothing to prevent it. Fury, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, began to displace the pain and despair. No, she wouldn't let them do this. She wouldn't let them break her or her child. She would rise. She would become strong for her girl. She looked at the phone again. Her fingers no longer trembled. She knew who she needed to call. There was only one person in this entire family who could understand her and, perhaps, help. Not for her sake, but for principle, for justice. Sitting on the cold bench under the starry sky, Marina felt the tears dry on her cheeks, and despair was replaced by an icy calm. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman who had been pushed to her limits, and now she was ready to fight. She recalled that strange conversation with Igor Matveyevich, which had taken place almost a year ago. Shortly after their wedding, they were sitting on the veranda of their country house, and her father-in-law, usually so reserved and taciturn, suddenly opened up. He talked about his service, about his friends, and then unexpectedly said, "You know, Marinoshka, the most important thing in a man's life is not a career or a title. The most important thing is children. And if God gives you a daughter, that's a special blessing. A daughter is someone who will love you simply because, no matter what, cherish that. If you have one," at the time, these words seemed to her simply the sentimental outburst of an old man. But now, after everything that had happened, they took on a new, deeper meaning. He wasn't just saying it. There was a personal, hard-won pain. In his words, she found his number in the phone book. Her fingers no longer trembled. She pressed the call button. "Hello." Came his worried voice on the other end of the line. He'd apparently left the house. "Igor Matveyevich." This was Marina. Her voice was even and firm. "Sorry to bother you. I need your help. I'm listening. Girl. What happened? Where are you? I'm at the gate. I'm leaving. But before that, I want you to know something. And I want you to answer me one question. Be honest. He said curtly. Your wife. She was always like this? Marina asked. So cruel. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. No. He finally answered hoarsely. She became like this after we lost our daughter. Marina froze. You had a daughter. Yes. His voice wavered. Our first Lenoshka. She died in infancy from a congenital heart defect. Tamara never got over it. It was as if she decided that girls were weakness. Pain. And she poured all her unspent love, her whole life into Lyosha, making him what she did. She's afraid. You see, I'm afraid of loving the girl again and losing her again. And that's why she hates her. Marina listened. And the puzzle came together. This didn't excuse Tamara Pavlovna, but it explained a lot. Her obsession with the heirs. Her irrational hatred of her unborn granddaughter. Thank you for telling me. Marina said quietly. Now, I want to ask you for anything. When I leave, come into the house and tell them one thing. Tell them that I will not do a DNA test. But not because I'm afraid, but because my child is not an object that can be verified. And tell Lyosha that he can choose. Either he leaves his mother today and becomes a husband and father, or he will never see me or his daughter again. Are you sure? He asked quietly. It's an ultimatum. Yes. Marina answered firmly. I can't live in this hell anymore. And my child won't be. Okay. Igor Matveyevich said after a pause. I'll tell you everything. And where are you going now? To a friend's. And tomorrow, I'll start a new life. Good luck to you. Girl. Lon said. And know that you're doing everything right. She hung up, called a taxi, and while she waited, she looked at the brightly lit windows of the house where the party continued. She no longer felt pain. There was only a feeling of immense relief, as if she had finally thrown off heavy shackles. The taxi arrived quickly. She didn't look back as she drove away. Marina arrived at her friend Olga's place after midnight. Despite the late hour, Olga met her at the door, already knowing something terrible had happened. Seeing Marina's pale, haggard face, she didn't ask any questions. She simply hugged her silently, led her into the kitchen, and poured hot tea. Tell me when you're ready, she said, sitting down opposite. And Marina told me everything without tears, in an even, almost lifeless voice, about the first unsuccessful attempt, about the hints of infidelity, about the climactic scene at the anniversary, about Lyosha's betrayal, and, finally, about her ultimatum, conveyed through her father-in-law. Scum. Olga summed up briefly when Marina finished. Both your mother-in-law and your husband. Both are good. So what now? Now it's a divorce. Marina said firmly. I'll never go back to him. That's right. Olga nodded. As a lawyer, I'm telling you, the sooner the better. The apartment is his. Yes. It's Grandma's. That's bad. So there's nothing to divide. You'll only be asking for alimony. But it's okay. We'll get through this. You can stay with me as long as you need. Thank you. Olya. Marina smiled for the first time that evening. But I want to rent. I want my own space. I'll start looking tomorrow. In the morning, as soon as she woke up, Marina saw a dozen missed calls from Lyosha and one message on her phone. Sorry. I understand everything. Call me. Please. She didn't respond. Instead, she took action. First, and she called work and took a week off work. She needed time to address her immediate needs. Then she opened a rental website and began browsing. The prices were steep. but she found several affordable one-room apartments in the area so she wouldn't have to change clinics for her future child. That afternoon, when she was already getting ready to go to the first screening, Igor Matveyevich called. "Marina." "Hello. How are you? Fine." She replied. "Thank you for asking. Did you pass on my words?" "I did." He sighed heavily. "Everything as you asked." So what? Her heart sank. "Tamara. She's in the hospital. Her blood pressure has jumped. She's in the cardiology department. Nothing serious. But she's making the most of it. Lyosha is next to her. He's torn. He can't decide anything." "I understand," Marina said coldly. "A classic move." "I know," said father-in-law. "I talked to him for a long time yesterday, trying to get his head around it. It seems he got it. But his fear of his mother is stronger. He asked me to tell you to give him time." "He doesn't have time," Marina snapped. "He had a choice. And he didn't make it." She hung up. No more waiting. Enough. That evening, she rented a small but clean and bright one-bedroom apartment, signed the lease, and put down the deposit. Olga helped her move the most essential things from her old life clothes. A laptop. Documents. When she entered her new empty apartment, she didn't feel sad. She felt freedom. The next day, she filed for divorce. Under reason, she simply wrote, "Irreconcilable differences." That evening, a large sum of money, 5,000 rubles, arrived on her card. The sender was Igor Matveyevich. She immediately dialed his number. "Igor Matveyevich. What is this? I can't accept it." "Can you?" he replied firmly. "Consider this compensation for emotional damages from the Belov family and assistance for your future granddaughter. You'll need money for an apartment and for the child now. This is not up for discussion. Marina, this is my decision." She wanted to object, but realized it was pointless. This man, whom she barely knew, turned out to be the only reliable support in a crumbling world. "Thank you," she whispered, barely holding back tears. "And one more thing," he added. "I talked to Lyosha. He's moving out of Tamara's place. I rented a room and said he needs to think." "Let him think," Marina replied indifferently. She no longer cared. She had started a new life. A life where she made her own decisions and bore responsibility for them. And this responsibility wasn't terrifying, but intoxicating. The divorce process was surprisingly quick. Lyosha didn't argue or try to divide anything. He showed up in court, haggard and vacant-eyed, and silently agreed to all the terms: alimony, child support, and child-sitting arrangements after the birth. Everything was decided in a single hearing. When the judge declared their marriage dissolved, Marina felt neither relief nor joy. Only emptiness. A chapter of her life was over. After the trial, Lesha waited for her at the exit. "Can I speak with you for a couple of minutes?" he asked. Marina nodded. "I wanted to apologize." And he looked away, not daring to look her in the eye. "For everything. I was wrong. I was a coward. Yes. There was an offer. Mom. She still doesn't understand what she's done." He smiled bitterly. "She thinks you destroyed her family. She doesn't even talk to her father. She blames him for taking your side." "I'm sorry," Marina said sincerely. She felt sorry for Igor Matveyevich, who had been drawn into this family conflict because of her. "Don't feel sorry. Father said it was the best decision he'd made in 30 years. Lesha looked at her for the first time, and she saw an echo of his old warmth in his eyes. He said he was finally able to protect what was important to him. They were silent. "Can you handle this alone?" he asked. "I can handle it," she answered confidently. "I'm not alone. I'm going to have a daughter. I can help somehow. Besides child support, Time will tell. Leisha. Marina sighed. Right now, I need some time alone. For both of us. He nodded. I understand. Just know this. I will always regret how things turned out. He turned and walked away. Hunched over. Marina watched him go and, for the first time in a long time, felt a pang of pity. He wasn't an evil man. Just weak. Broken by an overbearing mother. Never able to grow up. And 2 months later, on a sunny April day, little Anya was born fragile. With a squint. A shock of dark hair and huge brown eyes. A spitting image of Lyosha. When Marina sent the photo to Igor Matveyevich, he arrived at the maternity hospital that same day with a huge bouquet and, awkwardly, like a man, I tried to hide his tears as he looked at the tiny bundle. My granddaughter, he whispered, gently touching her small hand. Beauty. He became a true guardian angel for Marina and Winechka. He helped, supported, and spoiled his granddaughter with gifts. Tamara Pavlovna never called or inquired about the health of the child whose blood she so desperately wanted to test. It was as if she had erased them from her life. Lyosha was born a month after he was discharged. He arrived with a huge teddy bear and an apologetic smile. He stood by the crib for a long time, looking at his sleeping daughter, and on his face was such a mixture of love, pain, and regret that Marina's heart sank. Can I come? He asked quietly. Just to see her. You're her father. Lyosha. Marina replied. You have that right. He began coming. At first, once a week. Then more often, he clumsily changed diapers. Bottle-fed her. Carried her in his arms. Quietly drinking something for her. And Marina, looking at this picture, I saw him changing. Firmness was appearing in his gaze. Responsibility in his actions. One day, when Anya was 6 months old, he came home especially serious. Marina, I know I'm asking a lot, he said. But maybe we should try again first. He told her he was seeing a psychologist, trying to sort out his relationship with his mother, his fears, and that he finally understood what it meant to be a man, a husband, a father. I love you, he said. And I love our daughter. I'd do anything to get you back. Marina was silent for a long time. She looked at him, at their daughter sleeping in his arms, and thought, she's been through hell. She's learned to be strong and independent. Does she need this man in her life again? Will she be able to trust him again? I don't know. Lyosha. She answered honestly. I'm not ready to return to the past. But maybe we have a chance to build something new. He didn't ask for more. He was grateful for this fragile hope. Justice had triumphed not in court or through family squabbles. It had sprouted as the quiet seed of a new life, in which everyone received what they deserved. Tamara Pavlovna. Loneliness. Lyosha is facing a difficult road to adulthood. And Marina is her daughter's most precious treasure, and a chance for a future that she will now build by her own rules. A year passed. Marina stood in the middle of a green, sunlit park and watched as 1-year-old Anechka, comically waddling, took her first uncertain steps across the soft grass. Lyosha watched her nearby, an arm's length away, anxiously and admiringly. This park was her pride and joy, her project, which, despite all the difficulties, she had brought to completion. Now it was one of the city's favorite recreation spots, and her personal place of power. They didn't move in together. Marina wasn't ready for that. They dated as they had at the very beginning of their romance. They went to the movies, walked with their daughter in the park, and sometimes had dinner together. Lyosha had changed. He had matured. He no longer looked back at his mother when making decisions. He found a new, higher-paying job and insisted on increasing the child support amount. I want my daughter to have the best, he said. And there was no doubt in his voice. He kept his relationship with Tamara Pavlovna to a minimum. Rare. Formal phone calls on holidays. She never saw her granddaughter again. Igor Matveyevich said she withdrew, barely interacted with anyone, and blamed Marina for everything. Marina didn't feel sorry for her. Everyone reaps what they sow. Igor Matveyevich became the best grandfather in the world for Anechka. He spent all his free time with her, reading to her, pushing her on the swings, and proudly telling all his friends and fellow soldiers what a smart and beautiful girl he had growing up. One evening, when Lyosha had put Anya to bed and was about to leave, he paused at the door. "Marin, I know I have no right to ask," he said, "but I want you to know I work on myself every day to become a person worthy of being by your side, and I'll wait as long as it takes." Marina approached him and, for the first time in a long time, touched his hand on her own initiative. "I see. Lyosha. I see everything." She still didn't know if they could ever become a real family again. The wounds were too deep. But she knew one thing. She would never again allow anyone to decide for her how to live and whom to love. She had journeyed from humiliation to self-respect and found what was more important than any marriage herself. She closed the door behind him and went to her daughter's crib. Anya was asleep, making funny little smacking sounds in her sleep. Marina adjusted her blanket and quietly whispered, "We'll get through this. My girl, everything will be fine." And it was the purest truth. This story is about how you can emerge victorious from even the most terrible betrayal if you find the strength to fight for your dignity. It's about how true love doesn't require sacrifice, but gives you wings. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember, you're not alone, and you always have the right to choose yourself. Like if you believe in the power of a woman's soul, and subscribe to stay up to date with new stories.